Last year, indie rock band The Paper Kites found a building the rural outpost of Campbell's Creek, transforming it into a late-night watering hole named the Roadhouse. Today, on Indie Miners, we talk all things Paper Kites and review the new album, At the Roadhouse.
At the Roadhouse is the Paper Kites' sixth album. They've been on the scene now for 14 or 15 years now. We're going to check out that album, as well as ask the question as whether this act punches above its weight more than any other Australian artist from an international perspective. Hello to you, Al. Hope everything's well. What was your verdict on this album?
Yeah, good morning, mate. Look, with much anticipation for any Paper Kites fan out there, I've been looking forward to this album for a while. It is quite a long album, mate, so I'm kind of used to that kind of 9 to 10 song kind of album, so I was a bit sceptical at first, but on first listen I was really impressed. So I kind of did a little bit of research before the release of this album, and the basic concept was that the band kind of found this kind of old building that I believe was used for shopping for miners back in the day or something like that, and they've transformed it into this kind of smoky tavern, kind of late night kind of dive bar, with the idea of making an album that was going to kind of represent that kind of sound. And we might talk a little bit more about that later on as to why this particular album and band could go all right in the United States, because I think that this album, I don't know, I think it's going to suit those Paper Kites fans who like the more laid back kind of chilled sound, whereas I was a particular fan of the album 12/4, as you can kind of see behind me here, which had a bit more of a electronic kind of sound to it. But that said, for me, mate, I'm going to give my rating straight away. I've given it 3.5 stars. I was hoping to give it 4, but I just don't know. I think it was just a little bit too long, a little bit same for me towards the end, but I might be torn apart here by the critics, mate, and I'd be very interested in your thoughts, because this is the first album you've heard by the Paper Kites.
It is, yeah. Look, I did mind this particular album. I think it was a really cool concept that they road tested this material, pardon the pun, on a lot of the people at Campbell's Creek, where they actually had the Roadhouse there. So that meant that they were able to fine tune, they were able to figure out what was working, what wasn't working. I'd say that just in all, it was a pretty good listen. I think though that the tracks that I liked were the tracks where it was sort of a little bit outside of their comfort zone. So Black and Thunder and June's Stolen Car are two examples of that. Black and Thunder is almost like a yacht rock track. It's a Fleetwood Mac Eagles hybrid. So yacht rock in a good way. I mean, we all like yacht rock, I think, secretly. But Hurt So Good and Pocket Full of Rain are the other ones that I also like, which were certainly within their comfort zone. But I think overall, I sort of agree with you that the length of the album was troubling for me. It comes in at 79 minutes, and that's a double album for all intents and purposes. And I think when you have a double album, you need a lot of variety. So I think of the White Album, and I think of Melancholy by the Smashing Pumpkins. I think bands that produce these albums of that length, that where there isn't a lot of that variety, it can lose a bit of steam, and I sort of felt that way, and I'm marking it down as a result of that. So I'm giving it 3.5 stars as well, Al. But I think overall it was good, but and certainly it's something you should definitely check out. But I felt as if it had probably about 5 songs too many, unfortunately.
So we turn now to the big question, and the Paper Kites have quite a bit of popularity, and it did strike me back a little bit about how popular they are relative to other Australian acts from an international perspective. We're able to look at how Spotify rates particular Australian artists, and we were able to compare that, and it did come back with some interesting reading. Al, what do you think of this? I mean, in terms of the Paper Kites compared to a lot of the different Australian acts, it's definitely ahead of where you'd expect.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, when they had the song In Bloom, which was a bonus track from memory back in 2010, I mean, that shot them into the kind of the stratosphere, really. And from then, they've had a couple of songs on a few soundtracks and TV shows, but nothing to really kind of back up the data that kind of shows their popularity there, because they're still basically pulling in, was it 5.5 million views, listens a month, which is pretty huge, and to come in the kind of top 4, top 5 kind of most listened to bands from Australia on Spotify is pretty huge. So I'm just wondering their mark in America and how they've kind of possibly achieved this, because I don't think they're not, I mean, they're doing the tours in Australia and all that kind of stuff. They're a hard-working band, but I just think their sound is particularly something that American fans could warm to. It's definitely something that could be on an episode of Yellowstone that could, again, shoot them into the stratosphere. Mate, have you got any thoughts as to what?
Yeah, well,
behind that?
I mean, this list is a select list. It's obviously not Australian artists, but they're embarrassing a lot of artists who are quite popular from an Australian sense that haven't been able to crack the international market. Obviously, Bloom is one of those tracks with the almost 500 million listens on Spotify, which is quite extraordinary. But they do have a sound that does lean to a lot of those sort of Americana types of sounds that the American market quite likes, and I think that sort of means that it's probably on par in terms of popularity from an Australian sense compared to the American market, which is quite unusual. Usually you do have artists that might be more popular from an Australian point of view and really have difficulty really breaking through. And you obviously have some of those artists that do break through and are just, I guess, iconic. So Tame Impala you'd put into that category, AC/DC and the Bee Gees you certainly would as well. So that is our review of the Paper Kites at the Roadhouse. That wraps up another episode of Indie Miners. Please look to subscribe to the channel, follow us on Twitter, and let us know if there's an album you would like us to look at. So until next time, bye for now, and thank you for watching.